Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse on sustainability and climate change. My name is Riya Srivastav, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this thematic track on water management for climate resilience, biodiversity, and food security. To begin with, I would like to invite Dr. Shamal Kumar Sarkar to deliver the welcome remarks. Dr. Sarkar is working as a Distinguished Fellow, Water Resources Division, TERI. He has worked as Secretary in different ministries of Government of India, including Ministry of Jal Shakti. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, dear WSDS delegates and experts from European Union, European Commission, GIZ, WWF, Nature Conservancy, Deltairs, Netherlands, and others. On behalf of TERI, I welcome you all for the thematic track event, Water Management for Climate Resilience, Biodiversity, and Food Security. This event will help us to frame our views for presenting in the UN Water Conference on water, food, energy, ecosystem nexus being held in March 2023, especially with respect to two interactive dialogues, Water for Sustainable Development and Water for Climate Resilience and Environment. This event will help us to prepare our position on water management for climate resilience, biodiversity, and food security with a view to achieve water resilient future. As you know that the improved management of water resources have multiple benefits, including reducing water-related disasters, strengthening climate adaptation and resilience, and helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The impact of climate change has often felt through water. As the atmosphere passes 1 degree of warming above pre-industrial level, sea levels rise and the cryosphere melts. The effort of climate change are being felt never before. Take the example of Tajikistan. Tajikistan, which is co-hosting UN Water Conference in March 23, saw that 1,000 of the country's 14,000 glaciers have completely melted. The total volume of its glaciers, which make up more than 60% of water resources in Central Asian region, has decreased by almost a third. Currently, 3.6 billion people in the world face inadequate access to water at least a month per year. And this is expected to increase to more than 5 billion by 2050. Between 2001 and 2018, the UN Water Report reported that 74% of all natural disasters are water-related. That means flood and drought. Water-related hazards are therefore an important part of new initiative to achieve early warnings for all in the coming years. Well-managed water contributes to human rights and livelihood, economic development, poverty reduction, job creation, public health, gender equality, and maintenance of diversity. In the case of transboundary water basin, cooperative water management fosters cross-border harmony and cooperation. Conservation and managing water-related ecosystem play a vital role. Water is essential for lowering emission and capturing carbon. It is a necessary feedback for hydrogen production and to grow plants for biofuels. Well-managed effluents and other waste water enables reuse and reduce emission of methane and nitrous oxide. We need to acknowledge the importance of contribution water can make to climate mitigation and adaptation, and there is a need to conserve, protect, restore water and water-related ecosystems. 60% of the water meteorological WMO member states report declining capabilities of hydrological monitoring and thus in the provision of decision support in water, food, and energy nexus. More than 50% of countries worldwide have no quality management system for the water-related data in place. India too falls in this category. Take the case of the upper Indus Basin. In India, only a handful of glaciers and rivers are regularly visited and directly measured, and long-term analysis only possible for few cases. Our knowledge of the volume of water stored in the glacier ice is poorly understood as an estimate of snowfall. Need for better data on socio-demographic variables and human factors such as water-related water demand, food demand, and agricultural practices, cropping patterns, and infrastructure. There is, in fact, a need for action plan for integrated water and climate action. For each country, COP27 briefly discussed the subject, and hopefully the UN Water Conference will discuss this in more details. I thank all the experts in the panel today and all our colleagues for agreeing to participate for deliberation on the important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights and remarks. I would now like to invite our esteemed panelists to begin the panel discussion. Our esteemed chair of the session is Ms. Camilla Christensen Rai, Counselor at the Delegation of the European Union to India. Ms. Rai is responsible for the partnership on smart and sustainable urbanization between the EU and India, as well as the India-EU Urban Water Partnership. Please join us on the stage, ma'am. I would now like to invite Dr. Ashwini K. Gosain, who is an emeritus professor in the area of water resources engineering and GIS technologies in the Civil Engineering Department of IIT Delhi. Professor Gosain contributed to the formulation of the Ganga River Basin Management Plan. Please, sir. Our next panelist is Mr. Kees Bonds, who is an expert on integrated water resources management, Delta Rest, Netherlands. Mr. Bonds has been involved in many projects related to national water resource policy development and monitoring, data presentation and analysis. So please. Our next panelist is Mr. Suresh Babu, Director of River Basins and Water Policy at WWF India. He has been working relentlessly over the past few decades for river conservation in India. Please join us, sir. May I now request Dr. Jyoti Nale to join us as well. Dr. Nale is currently working as a project advisor for the India-EU Water Partnership Action at GIZ India. Her core work areas include river basin management, environmental flows, and water use in irrigation. We also have Dr. Roshni Arora online, a hydroecologist in the Nature Conservancy. She has more than 8 years of experience in freshwater science, hydroecology, data analysis and modeling, and conservation. Let us extend a warm welcome to all our panelists. Our panel discussion will follow a structured format, with each panelist having an opportunity to share their views on the topic as per the chair's moderation. We encourage audience participation, and we will have time for audience questions towards the end of the session, followed by a summarization of the session by the chair. I would now request Ms. Rai to take the panel discussion forward.
Right, okay, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for coming for this thematic session. And of course, all welcome to our panelists and our panelist, which is also joining us online. So the objective of this session here today is to discuss the challenges and opportunities which influence the synergy between ecosystem, biodiversity, agriculture, and water availability. And also it is to prepare, align the positions and announced actions to accelerate efforts on water management, for climate resilience, biodiversity, and food security, in fact, we are covering quite a range of topics today, and we would like to make an attempt to interlink these topics. Just, I want to say briefly, from the EU, we have the EU-India Water Partnership. So this is between the EU, Government of India, Ministry of Jal Shakti. Since 2016, it's agreed, and we work together with Ministry on topics of in the area of water, of course. I will say a few things about the EU and water, because we did plan to have a panelist from the EU Commission. It's unfortunately was not possible in the end here. But so when we say EU and water, the main overall strategy of the EU is the EU Green Deal and the EU Climate Adaptation Strategy. And also there's established a working group set up among the EU member states, the 27 EU member states, to share lessons learned, to bring these into future activities and feedback into the policy level. Of course, at the Government of India level, there's the National Action Plan for Climate Change, and within that, there's the National Water Mission. So I just want to highlight a few overall policy documents. From EU Commission, I mean, we have faced also, just when 2022 turned 23, a strong, you can say, heat wave, even at the winter season in Europe, and we are facing the droughts, which is hitting the EU. And of course, it has an impact on the agriculture, on the harvested loss, and also it has an impact on the water sector, as well as the impact on the hydropower production of the electricity. So since 2019, the EU has set itself a sustainable growth path, and that is based on the EU Green Deal. It has a set of strategies, and I will just mention some of them here. The Zero Pollution Action Plan, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the Biodiversity Strategy, and the EU Climate Adaptation Strategy. This is our overall framework from the EU side, from the EU Commission. So as was also mentioned in the keynote, we need to join forces to establish a robust water action agenda as the key outcome of the upcoming UN Water Conference in March here, 2023. So this was just to give a small introduction from the EU side. Now, of course, we will start with our speakers, and what we had a set of questions for this session. So first of all, I will ask the speakers one question each, and you will approximately have 5 minutes to respond. Then we will also take questions from audience, and depending on the time, we will move to a second round with the panelists. So let me first ask Professor Gosain. I would like to ask you the first question, and that is, what are the key instances or examples which indicate the strength of the interlinkages between ecosystem, biodiversity, agriculture, and water? So please, over to you, please.
Thank you. I will put the thing in perspective in terms of when we are looking at the climate change implication. That is something which is happening and is going to happen in a more intense manner. But if we try to understand what are the present linkages, how the present water management is affecting our water resources, we have to start with that. Just giving an example that almost every river system, if you see, we have imposed more demand than the availability of water resource in that basin. And that is reflected in the fact that your groundwater table is falling down year after year. That means there's a deficit between the demand and the supply, and you are taking care of the deficit by mining the groundwater. But that is, what is the implication of that? Is already affecting your ecosystem services. The groundwater table is falling, and the natural system, which is governed by the fact that when your recharge in the groundwater takes place during the monsoon, the groundwater table goes up, and it has that level has a gradient with respect to the level in the river, and the river gets some base flow or the supplementary lateral flow, which makes the river perennial for a longer period, even if it is not fed by the glaciers or the snow melt. When we have systems which are perennial because of this fact. Now, if the groundwater table goes down, then you are going to have a situation where your river water will be lost to the groundwater, and you will be losing water, the surface water, which is otherwise being used for other purposes. So I think we have to think in terms of, these are the connectivities. And if we impose on top of that now the climate change implications, because of the higher temperature, your crop water demand is going up. You're going to have more moisture requirement by the crop for its yield production. And the fact that the number of rainy days are reducing, though the volume is remaining similar, you're going to have more intense rainfall in the future. The implication of that is the floods, more erosion of the soil, losing your good fertile soil. And not only that, you have an implication on the crop production, because the areas which are around 60% of the area in the country, which is still not having any irrigation facilities, is rain-fed agriculture. So if you have more gap in the two rainfalls, the crop cannot sustain that stress of the moisture in the soil which happens, and crop will fail. So you have a bigger problem, and you have to think in terms of looking after these connectivities, these interactions between the surface water, groundwater, as I've just mentioned, between the utilization of the requirement of the crop for the biomass production and the conditions which are going to prevail. Those are the issues. And secondly, when you bring in the third component, which is the ecology. Now, since you're going to have less water in the rivers because of reduction in the base flow, also because of your man-made changes, you have created stretches which are devoid of water. So as such, your species are going to be affected. So you have to then really also go in for the restoration of those. And then lastly, the energy. If you're having groundwater table which has fallen down, you're going to use more energy for extracting the same amount of water which you are doing when the water table was higher up. So, and these are some of the issues which I'll stop here for the time being, and I'll come back to some of these things in a more elaborate manner. But these nexuses have to be understood, and there's a contextual requirement to understand the typology of that area which you are looking at. There's not going to be the same rule which will be applicable everywhere. You have to first understand what are the local conditions, what is happening there, and what kind of actions are to be taken. That has to be decided by the local conditions and what you have done with respect to the man-made changes and the climate change put together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your input with us. And of course, bringing us from the groundwater to the surface water, to the crop production, to the ecology, and also towards the energy sector. So it is a whole range of very important topics, and the interlinkages, of course, between these topics. So now I would like to ask Mr. Kees Bons from the Netherlands. And I'd like to ask you one question here. So what nature-based solutions are available which can help in reducing the stress on the interlinkages and may ensure an integrated resource? Yeah. So this is one question for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nature-based solutions are now becoming more and more known in the water sector. But in fact, the philosophy of nature-based solution is that we use the strength of nature and we use that for the benefits of humankind. So that's not limited to the water sector. In fact, it is applicable to all sectors in life. If we fight nature, nature will fight back. If we use the forces of nature in our benefits, then it will strengthen us. One important aspect for that is that we understand those forces and how they work. For instance, if we look at biodiversity, biodiversity is threatened. The biggest threat for biodiversity is agriculture. At the same time, the biggest beneficiary of biodiversity is agriculture. So it is the enemy of its own beneficiary because it uses tools that they do not understand, or we do not understand the impacts. Pesticides also kill biodiversity, while the insects, the different parts of ecology are the main safeguard against illnesses, sickness in agriculture. So first we require understanding. And only if we understand that, and we are very far from fully understanding this, can we really harness nature for our own benefits. The most simple nature-based solution at the moment for this intricate system is to say, okay, let's assume that nature knows best. And then try to keep those places where the nature is undisturbed as good as possible, because these areas are serving as a sort of a restoration area for insects, animals, and so on. So safeguard those areas that are still working as a sort of original ecosystem. Do not encroach on them further, but then try from those areas expand the functions of that system towards our own economic, urban, agricultural, water, economic, industrial system. So I cannot name, or it's not useful to name individual interventions, but the approach, I think, is very important first to recognize that we use nature as our inspirator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us on the nature-based solutions. You mentioned also the strengths of the nature, and that that you said also that we should assume that the nature knows best. I think that's quite a good point to take with us as well. So thank you very much. Now I will ask Mr. Suresh Babu, and I will ask you one question which is regarding policy. So what coordinated policy responses are needed that could address the challenges influencing the interlinkages between ecosystem, biodiversity, agriculture, and water? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, TERI, for this invitation to be part of this esteemed panel. It's a pretty big question. What should be the policy responses? But let me take one step back, and I just want to connect with what Dr. Sarkar said. You know, what are some of the things that we can take up to the UN Water Conference? And there is a lot of discussions right now about, there is a lot of excitement, at least in our sector, water sector, that inland water has found its way into the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So that's quite exciting and quite new. So some organizations, including WWF and some thinkers, came together to understand, what does this mean? So this means that we need to protect 300,000 kilometers of rivers across the globe as free flowing. Second, we need to conserve 300 million hectares of wetlands across the globe. So whatever we discuss about policy responses has to be directed towards that. Now, India is a big stakeholder. And what gives us hope is also that the new budget, there was a lot for environment and particularly on wetlands. There was one announcement on Amrit Dharohar. It's actually talking about wetlands for the first time in the union budget. And it pretty much talks about the interconnectedness that we all heard about from Dr. Gosain and Dr. Keespo. Last year, we talked about Amrit Sarovar, at a district level, 75 wetlands to be restored, rejuvenated. We talked about Ramsar sites. We heard about Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which talked about, I think 50 lakh odd water harvesting structures. So all these are initiatives that are happening. It's a response to a crisis that we know that it's real. Now, how do you connect these dots? These are, some of these initiatives are, wetland restoration, water harvesting, agriculture. These are all happening all across. Now, is there one unit, one lens under which this can all be brought under? And that's where we strongly feel, and Dr. Gosain and Dr. Bounds and everyone is an expert on this. It's around how do you bring all these aspects into a basin approach?
Thank you.
What worries me is I just finished by one statement. The policy environment is quite good right now, but what we need to look at is investments in institutions at the local level, because this is about trade-offs. What Professor Gosain and you said, agriculture, takes water. Agriculture brings in pesticides, but biodiversity is impacted. Industries need water. Biodiversity needs clean water. So how do you sort of facilitate institutions to look at a negotiated approach? Someone's gain should not be someone's loss. So at a basin level, and this is something that WWF, we work a lot on the ground at different basins, and we are finding that institutions need to gear up to these challenges. One district administration cannot do this. Is there an irrigation department who can do it? No, they can't do it at this point in time, because all the things that Dr. Gosain said may not be under their ambit right now, even the technical knowledge and the expertise and the mandate. So we need to create those institutions to be empowered and empower them to respond to these challenges, understanding this connectedness. Otherwise, things will remain the same. And how do we do that is something that we can talk about going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your input. And also what you mentioned is that what can we take to the UN Water Conference? And you mentioned in the union budget, about the wetlands, as well as the river basin management approach, which actually is a good point to take, because our next speaker will be Ms. Jyoti, Dr. Jyoti. And here I would like to ask you a question also, of course. So that is, what nature-based solutions are available and which can help in reducing the stress on the interlinkages and may ensure an integrated resource? Of course, this is the same question as was given just before, but let us also get your feedback on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camilla, and good evening to all of you. Regarding the nature-based solutions, I would like to start with the comment that the whole crux or the focus of this idea is about the conservation, protection, restoration of various resources that are available in the nature. Examples to quote from would maybe Sureshji touched upon the Jal Shakti Abhiyan activity, the similar kind of activities at the federal government or the state level, or in the participatory approach. For example, the Pani Foundation activity from Maharashtra, if we can see, the whole focus of these activities is on conservation of every drop of water where it falls. So if we try to see on the latest river basin scale assessments that Central Water Commission has put together, about 2,000 billion cubic meter of water is annually available in the country. And that puts us already in the water stress situation. But sometimes in the region like Southern India, it already looks like water scarce situation. So because the availability of water in these regions is not where it is needed and when it is needed. So the disparity in terms of scale and time of availability of water is the issue here. And these type of schemes try to address the availability at the location itself. This can be one of the example of nature-based solution. Another nature-based solution that comes to my mind, which addresses this interlinkage between water, food, and agriculture sector, is the very recent, I would say, ongoing activity in which the UN has identified this current year as International Year of Millets. So we all know that millets are known to be known in the arid regions where there is less availability in terms of all kinds of inputs, including water. Also, putting aside the nutritional and health benefits of millets, of course, they are very important, but the relatable factor here is that under situations of in the face of climate change, where there is need to be resilient, millets are kind of a key solution there. So these are some kinds of natural based solution that I see important. When it comes to the interlinkage between water and, I would say, ecology or something like that, I feel that that is the area which is kind of lagging in terms of understanding and implementation of actions, where this resource security of this interrelationship between water and ecology or biodiversity is not realized to its potential strength, versus water and agriculture relationship is quite well understood and celebrated. That's what I personally feel, but there is a need to catch up momentum regarding the interrelationship between water and ecology. And just to comment on, maybe just to close, I would also want to propose to use the word nature in the nature-based solution to understand it differently as a human nature, and to propose some human behavioral changes or some lifestyle changes that can be considered as the cheapest and most effective nature-based solution to the challenge of climate change. Maybe we can think of minimalistic lifestyle or more sustainable lifestyle. That could be one cheapest and, I would say, most attainable, easily attainable solution. I know it is not easily attainable, but I would like to propose it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for, of course, mentioning the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, where you conserve every drop of water. You also mentioned the river scale assessment by Central Water Commission about water scarcity and the examples of the millets. And you mentioned the need to focus more on water and biodiversity, the link between water and biodiversity. And of course, I think the last point, nature-based solutions, to consider a lifestyle changes as a nature-based solution. Thank you very much. And now I will go to our speaker, which is join us online, Ms. Rosny Aurora. So I'd like to ask you one question here, and that is, how can synergies among interest and actors be created and strengthened, leading to climate resilience?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, hello? Hello.
Recognize monitor though.
Hello?
Double control this one. We discuss all that.
Excuse me, sir.
Brief question, and then one brief. Yes, please. Thank you. So your question is, sorry, I have to stop you now. Your question is?
When I was visiting a village, I saw water running in a plain, clear water 6 inches high. I asked my government, what is this? He said, sir, green is free, electricity is free. So they do not stop the boring.
Okay, thank you for your question. Now, please, we have a response. Yeah, thank you.
I totally understand your sentiments. I want to take you to few villages where I can show you. Despite having water, people are not wasting it. Okay, because investments have gone in behavior change, making them realize the value of water. Have we done that? Let's reflect on that, and the answer will follow. So it's easy to say that, okay, price बढ़ा दो, technology layout, it's fine. Attack the right issue, value water, behavior change. Sir, I understand that, but maybe let us relook at your own strategy and see, where things are working. We highlight all bad practices. There are hundreds and thousands of good practices. Let us understand why it has worked. Let's highlight. She talked about Pani Panchayat. Why is Pani Panchayat working? Let's understand that. I'm happy to engage in a conversation. I'm sure many people have experiences. Be happy to.
Right. Thank you so much. Now we will go to our speaker online. And so the question for you is that how can synergies among interest and actors be created and strengthened, leading to climate resilience? Thank you. Just 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Are you able to hear me? Am I audible? Hello? Hello? It seems there is some audio issue.
Okay, this is working on this.
Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Roshni, we are just checking some audio settings here. Just
Okay.
hold on, give us a moment.
Sure.
No, it's not working. Huh? Okay, you please respond if you're able to. Thank you.
Hello?
And if it doesn't work, we will move on with our panelists. And then you maybe come back again in a moment. So now what I'm going to ask, yeah, okay, one more question, please. So any other of the panelists now, there has been one to Mr. Babu, you maybe address to one of our other panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is to Professor A.K. Gosain. Sir, you have very well brought out the linkages between the depleting water resources and ecology and the food production. We are a water surplus country by the kind of southwest monsoon we have. We receive close to 4,000 billion cubic meter of water, and our requirement is 3,000 billion cubic meter, close to that. Even climate change, the rainfall changes are there, but the overall, as you had mentioned, the overall volume of the rainfall is same across the country, if we take country as a whole, though the regions are changing. And the rainfall intensity, suddenly you are getting flood somewhere and drought somewhere. The intra-variability within the season is increasing. But the more water depleting, the stress which is coming across India is because of the groundwater extraction, and that is being used for agriculture. So is it the cropping pattern or the agriculture which is responsible for the depleting water resources in the country, especially when we take case of Punjab, which has got 5 rivers, so many water, but it is a semi-arid area and producing paddy. So that's the irony of our place. So what's your response to that? Thank you.
See, our irrigation efficiency in most of the area, if you take the total country, is something between 30 to 35%. That's very low irrigation efficiency. Agriculture is around 80 to 85% usage of water per hectare. You reduce your water consumption to half, and that is a huge surplus. And then you can allocate flows. Right now, our major issue is that if we want to revive or if we want to provide to the river systems the environmental flow, from where it will come. Because as such, your demand is more than the availability. So you either have to take from industrial demand or from agriculture demand or from the domestic demand. That's where you have to do the trade-offs. But the providing the environmental demand is a very essential thing. So you have to start thinking in terms of restoring the things by doing demand management. And that is possible. It's a question of investing money and changing your cropping, the irrigation methods. And if still it doesn't happen, you have to then start thinking in terms of changing your cropping patterns. Have those crops which are less intensive, less water intensive, and things can be done. I think it's not something which is not doable. It's a question of having the proper strategies, and first the knowledge that this is what is happening. We don't have river basins analyzed in a manner that you can first look at the overall water balance. And that's what is being done by this under India EU. 2 basins are being taken, the Tapi Basin and the Ramganga Basin, where is being showcased that how to tackle these issues, how to first generate the information, have the basic information, and then involve the stakeholders to really come out with the trade-offs. Okay.
Thank you, so.
Thank you. Thank you for this. So should we try once more, our online speaker?
Am I audible?
So good, welcome.
Okay, thank you.
So the question here for you is that while solutions are available, why we have not been able to implement them? So you have five minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's nice to meet everyone. I think some of this question has been, in parts, been answered by, I think, several of our panelists. Like just now, Professor Gosain said that there is a lack of, information, data, knowledge, resources, capacity, perhaps funding, and also sort of setting common goals and visions to sort of explicitly bring out these linkages between water, biodiversity, ecosystems, and food. I think it's while we are progressing on several of these aspects, the question is how much is enough, to be able to sort of implement these solutions in the long run. When it comes to, we talked about nature-based solutions, which like Dr. Jyoti said, it are basically solutions that utilize natural solutions, be it restoration, conservation, protection of ecosystems, including freshwater ecosystems, which are basically lie at the crux of everything that happens in a watershed. And these solutions act on our ecosystems, and they try to restore elements or ecological and hydrological processes that ultimately lend us those ecosystem services that we tend to utilize and want to preserve or make it sustainable. But what we need to realize, and we do realize, but we need to re-emphasize, is that we are working with nature, which is working with ecosystems that have their own time scale of operation, of restoration, of showing outcomes and benefits, and which are basically long-term. Freshwater ecosystems are notoriously known for taking time to restore once the proper solutions are put in place. So I think we need our visions to be aligned both in terms of short-term and long-term goals. We need mechanisms, be it governance mechanisms or funding, to support those solutions in the long term for 5, 10, 15 years. So that momentum and monitoring of these solutions also can be done, so that we can learn from what we have achieved, from what we have failed. Like Mr. Suresh said, that there are so many success stories that have been going on locally, which also tend to not be emphasized as enough to learn from. We need to see how those solutions can be upscaled, and also learn from the failures. There is nothing wrong in failures. It also shows what doesn't work. So I think it's about to summarize, it's about strengthening our enabling conditions, which be through data and knowledge, through cross-coordination among policies, through making available, reallocating, innovating in the financial sector for water conservation, for climate change, for biodiversity financing and conservation, and also aligning in terms of timescales and temporality of these of the behavior of these ecosystems, and also considering humans as a part of this ecosystem and not something that we are sitting outside of it and looking at it, but rather we are part of this ecosystem and working along with those scales. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for also highlighting the, you can say, the vision, the long-term, the short-term vision, and monitoring towards the goal of such vision, but also to bring out the success stories. And here I'll just give a small example. Like last week, we had the EU-India Urban Forum here in India Habitat Center, organized by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the EU. And what we had asked the speakers in our 3 panels was to bring a photograph of a smart city, a photograph of water, photograph of solid waste management, a photograph of urban mobility. So when we put these 13 photos together, it is 13 excellent solutions in cities in India, cities in Europe. And what did we learn from this? It is to highlight the success stories, the excellent solutions, but it is also to understand why is it that they are excellent solutions and by whom were these implemented, as well as we always have to take the local context into account. We cannot copy, we cannot just take from one place to another place. That means between cities in India, maybe it's between cities in Europe, there will always be a local context which we'll have to take into account and adapt into. So now we will go again, and I will ask the panel. I will now start with Mr. Kees Pons, because you have a flight to take today, and we don't want you to be late for that flight. So I will ask you to speak first, and then the other panelists. So we will do very brief interventions, and that will be on solutions. Let us try and focus on solutions. So that will be the same questions for all here. Solutions are available, but why we have not been able to implement them. So thank you, Mr. Kees Pons. Thank you, please.
The main reason why solutions are not implemented is because we as consumers are not willing to take the consequences. We want to buy the food we want to eat meat, at least many people in the world want to eat meat. We want to have all kinds of luxuries, and we want the cheapest price available. And that is basically the demand side, and we cannot blame farmers for then reacting on that, or industries to react on that. So it's not a blame game, but we have to take responsibility as consumers. And the developing countries are using trade to export the impacts of intensive agriculture and so on, including Europe. So the exporting of the problems is also going on. Trade is a very important factor in the interaction between ecosystem, biodiversity, agriculture, and water. So without looking at trade, you cannot understand that question and the feedbacks that are there. So I think if we really have to work on having everybody understand, to awareness of everybody, and that will enhance the political awareness and the real solutions. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Professor Gosain, same question, while the solutions are available, but why have we not been able to implement them?
I think first we should look at that, what are the possible solutions? Because you're talking of water, which is a very complex subject. So there's no single solution. The interactions, as we have said, that interaction of water with all the other segments is so intricate and many times is not even understood. We have to go in and the only way is to go into the simulation mode, because you cannot implement something and then wait for the implication of that. Now, what we have been doing is that at the river basin level, first requirement is to understand what is the resource availability at the basin level. That you have quantified in terms of not only the overall annual basis average value, but also the variation within the year, how the flows change and how the monsoon affects that. Now, having done that, then you should understand what is your demand. And now you should come out with the benchmarks that if your demand management has to be done for producing the same crop, that's one scenario. For producing the same crop under the present conditions, how much water is legitimately required? So unless you have that knowledge of what is the basic requirement of the water, and that can come from the simulation of the crop production. There are models available, there are technologies available where you can find out using the phenology of the crop, how much is the water requirement. You can also monitor the water stress, the temperature stress, and the nutrient stress. You have models, we are using those models, the hydrological models, which have the crop growth component embedded into the hydrological model. So you can simulate all the components of the water balance. How much is the recharge taking place, knowing the actual rainfall? How much is the evapotranspiration, knowing the land use? How much is the flow being, how the rainfall is getting divided into different components? How much is the recharge taking place and going to the groundwater? This hydrological model can be a good information base where you can generate scenarios that if I do this, how much demand can be reduced and how you can come to a stage where you are now within the availability. So if you do that, your recovery of your groundwater table will start over a year, over not 1 year, but many years. You can slowly, and then you can do the monitoring. You have to have the sensors, which are available very free of cost, or you can say that very nominal cost. You can start monitoring that, what has been the difference, and that can again be done in the simulation. You don't have to wait for 10 years to really do that. You can do in this under the simulation mode. And to tell you that we have already developed the basin model for all the basins of the country. We are having a portal. I can also provide the link where we are simulating every basin every day and using the rainfall forecast of IMD, which is 4 days to 6 days ahead forecast. They use 2 different models. Using that, we are predicting that what will be the fate of that rainfall if it comes. So that means that during the monsoon period, you can use it as an early warning system where the flood will come, when it will come. It can, when you have a lead time of around 2 to 3 days effective, even if I say that the 4th day of rainfall forecast is not that good, at least the next 2 days of rainfall forecast will be good. So you still have around 2 to 3 days of warning. You can use the same thing because we simulate the moisture content of the soil. So you know that in different parts of the basin, what is the moisture content of the soil, knowing the land use, because this is a complicated model. I'm not going to describe that, but you are getting that output, that how the moisture in the soil will be in the next 10 days. So now you can decide whether you need the irrigation or not. So it can be a good advisory to the farmer. And you can also simulate that how much is the fertilizer which is required, so that your fertilizer use is not creating the non-point source problem. Even if you don't go in for the bio-based fertilizer, you can still ensure that the chemical fertilizer is used only to the extent which is required by the crop, and is not going into the groundwater, is not going into the moving into the surface water. So I think technologies are available. We are using that. We are demonstrating that. Is a question of having the will, having the organizations who can take. So you need the basin level organizations to be put in place. And the first experiment was of Ganga, where we had done the Ganga River Basin Management Plan as a consortium of IITs. So all these outputs were generated. The question is that what is the uptake of these things, the scientific information which is there to be used. So do we have the local level organizations which can be deployed for this purpose? You start monitoring the various things, including the groundwater table, how is reviving. So once you have done that, then your ecosystem services are going to be revived automatically. If you have brought the groundwater table back to the pristine, it might not reach that level, but at least you have an objective that this is what is required to be achieved. You might achieve half of it, you might achieve. So that's where we were even telling the Ministry of Water Resources that first of all, you have to know that what was the pristine flows when there was no development, when there was no abstraction of the groundwater, and that it can again be done through the modeling approach. We have done that for most of the river basins. I'll stop here. Sorry, I've taken too much time.
No. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you. And so, Mr. Suresh Babu, that's the same question about solutions available, but we are not been able to implement them. So your input, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Not much to add, but I think one of the key things that we see on the ground is that we need to articulate what is in it for you and I to adopt a particular solution. Okay. So we don't do that quite powerfully, quite convincingly. So I think that's something that we need to do. And you talked about this website. I think it'll be important to bring all these solutions together, the basket of solutions that we have and the techno-econometrics together to tell what is the return on investment with most of these solutions. And I think there'll be more uptake and more interest in that. The second point, India is a signatory to the Ramsar Convention. I just want to highlight for the benefit of the audience that there is a program called CEPA, which talks about communication, education, participation, and awareness. This is particularly focused on wetlands. And I think the same approach we need for the sector that we are talking about, the water sector. Capacity at different levels. Someone asked about, why is the water resources getting degraded? Is it agriculture the problem? If you actually map it with the number of villages that we have and the number of wetlands, I'm just giving an example, 230,000 wetlands in the country. And, most of it is getting degraded, vanishing. Okay. Now, if you were to rebuild that interest in local communities to restore that, build their capacity, empower them to engage in conversations, in conservation, and in upkeep of these wetlands, things will change. And Dr. Gosain will agree also that it will also have an impact in many places on aquifers as well. So, but we don't have that know-how and the capacity right now. Now, where will that capacity come from? Will it be at the Gram Panchayat level? Yes, it has to be at the Gram Panchayat level. It has to be at the district level. One example of integration, solutions exist and it's getting, divided into different pieces of our own governance structures. you have different departments at the district level. I'm not talking about at the national level or the state level. They have to deliver on an annual plan. If some of these solutions, pertaining to agriculture, you are talking about number of practices around water use efficiency, industrial practices. If those gets into the annual plans of the departments at the local level, it will make a huge difference to the rivers. But we don't use river as a lens, and therefore we need to look at how the planning processes can also facilitate this kind of integration of and uptake of solutions, which we don't really talk about. That's my second point. So first is a SEPA kind of an approach. Second one is to empower the planning processes to recognize these solutions. The third one is around networks. I'm sure all of you are experts. Okay, we're just repeating what you know, and you must have piloted and mainstream many technologies. Is there in many forums we come across great people who have ideated and worked on these solutions, but there is no space, there is no platform where we meet frequently, where we exchange this knowledge. Is there a repository where anyone at a small village in Assam can draw upon your knowledge? I think that dissemination, that facilitation someone has to do, whether it is a ministry level, whether it is TERI, whether it is IITs, and I don't know, but I think there is a need for that kind of a platform that we need to look at. And the last point that I wanted to talk about is that these institutions, basin level institutions are great. Some basins are so huge, it's unmanageable. Many districts, many states. Even as small tributary in our country is many districts and many blocks. Okay, so unless we go to the sub-basin level to empower our block level guys to say that, okay, different blocks, this is how the river has to be managed in your locality, things are not going to really look at. So there is much more detailing that we need to look at, and WWF and GIZ, we are actually collaborating to look at how the districts can look at river basins management in a better way, and we're trying to come up with what's called as a district Ganga plan. 4 pilot districts have been taken, and again, these nuances we are trying to understand, what kind of an institution can actually support development of a district level tributary plan. It's interesting because the capacities don't exist, but I think it's an opportunity to work with them and take it forward. And so the point is that we need to look at different models of institutions, which will include people like you, your experience. So how do you how do we create a space for you all and all of us to engage in the initiative at a district level or a tributary level is something that we need to talk about. I'll stop there.
Right, thank you. I think this is a good moment to, we'll come back to the 2 panelists, but just to take one more question. Yes, please.
Good evening, I'm AJ. I work with the university on this semi-arid area of Rajasthan.
Right.
And so while trying to resurrect a 300 kilometers long river, which has completely dried over last 30 years, called the Sabi River, we took a yatra of 57 villages with the students and local community. The biggest challenge that we faced is that what they call, Dr. Rajendra Singh, the Waterman of India, says, Nadi ke hak ka ilaka. The area that belongs to the river, it was very difficult to find out because the encroachment and extraction is taking place in such a manner that all the boundaries of the river have been lost. So even if we wanted to do some work, we wanted to start from one small portion, a very small tributary, as you said, in one of these small panchayats. We could not because of a big fight between the people who already encroached on the river land. They don't want to leave that. So how do we overcome such problems?
Right. Thank you very much. Maybe Dr. Jyoti, if you would like to give a response.
Yeah. So I would like to maybe start with an example where I can see that the solution is available, but the implementation is not happening. For example, the case of environmental flows. We know that the environmental flow come as a handy tool to come up with the determination of the dependabilities of the aquatic ecosystems on the water. But when it comes to implementation, we have to bring all the voices on the same table. So it is about the participatory and stakeholder engagement approach. And also, it is also important to understand very, I would say, in a detail, the opportunity cost that is attached to it. If we have to implement environmental flows, who is going to be at loss? As sir said already, that it is the same case that you want to protect the river and its own environment. In Netherlands, if Dr. Kees was here, he would have mentioned the concept of room for river. It needs its own room. But who is going to be at the losing end at it? So this kind of thing, this kind of, I would say, negotiation needs the stakeholder engagement and their awareness creation for their own understanding of what they are going to get out of it. When they lose something, there is something that they are also going to gain out of it. And also the political will, the political challenges attached to it are also the key, I would say, aspect attached to it. But I feel the original solution is the discussion and negotiation and awareness.
Can I also quickly respond? We have faced this, many failures of river rejuvenation in attempts. At the beginning itself, people say that, okay, we don't want to vacate that land. What has worked in some of our cases was that the strongest resentment to part with the natural catchment area of rivers happened by showing them models. We had few examples of where people have come together, overcome these challenges, so where we took people who were against rejuvenation, showed them how things worked and what benefits they accrued. But it took time. It took a long time for us. So we can chat over this, how probably we could, it's a process, it will take time. We always talk about, one small river rejuvenation. It's much smaller than what you said you have done. It's about 160 kilometers. Farming lands, sugarcane. We face a similar challenge, and in 5 years we could bring some change to that river. I can share those lessons with you.
Thank you so much. We will take the 2 questions now to the panel, and then we will proceed like this. So the question to Dr. Jyoti, that will be about the interlinkages, which of course we have talked about: ecosystem, biodiversity, agriculture, and water. But then we could introduce also resilience. So, in terms of resilience, what is it which is required in order to build resilience among communities? Or maybe we can also look at it from a different point of view: is that, can we actually build the resilience of communities, or is it that it is coming within? The resilience is coming within because there is a pressure from some kind of form. So please, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Camilla. Regarding resilience building, I feel that building resilience of communities, of biodiversity and ecosystems, also all kind of water user sectors, is all at a same, I would say, at importance level when it comes to facing the challenges that climate change is posing, specifically because the water availability is at risk because of the foreseen climate change. And these all sectors are the shareholders when it comes to water. So everybody has its own, I would say, own understanding of what share they deserve, what share is actually needed. And when it comes to reallocation of water from one sector to other sector, every sector has to build their own resilience to, I would say, adopt that new allocation scenario. That would be my submission for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to our online speaker, Dr.
Yes.
Roshni. And yes, I will go back to the question which was about solutions. Solutions which, is there any particular reason we know that we have solutions, but we are not able to implement them? Maybe from your side. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. But I think I did start off with that question previously, where I mentioned that it's about developing shared vision, shared goals, where different voices of the ecosystems of the society, even those voices that are cannot be represented, including such as of different species or marginalized communities, that need to be incorporated within these solutions. Like Suresh said, be it behavioral change or be it change, actually witnessing change in ecosystems, it takes time. It may take several years or even decades. and committing resources, building capacity to sustain that momentum, to be able to implement the solutions that we simulate or predict that might impact on the ground will take time. And I think it's about chipping away at these blocks slowly but steadily that ultimately would sort of lead towards implementation of the solution. I mean, water being such a diverse subject, it's sort of when we talk about water conservation or conservation of freshwater ecosystems, where you look at freshwaters as ecosystems and not just as resource systems. They bring in, they tie up several thematic areas. It's not just about water supply, or it's not just about biodiversity conservation. It's not just about agricultural productivity, but rather water is something that ties the entire landscape or the entire watershed together, be it urban areas, cities, wetlands, rivers, groundwater. And I think having all these voices from different thematic areas, different expertise, different experiences is very essential towards finding and tailoring solutions for each context. I think initially somebody said that there is no single silver bullet solution for for all the basins in the country. It will have to be tailored. The solutions that work for Ganga Basin may not work for Narmada Basin or say Krishna Basin. They have the problems might be similar, but the way that the enabling conditions present themselves, they differ, and that sort of need to be tailored accordingly. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So before I will go back to the panelists and ask them for only one keyword, which is our takeaway from this session. I'll just invite for any further questions. Yes, please. Yes, we will just take a microphone, please.
So that water is pretty much scarce here, but like really big chunk is taken by northern neighbor. Any solution is that like negotiation of these water or any other solution or being involved?
See, basically, I feel that we are coming to a situation where all these transboundary basins have to be looked at collectively. I mean, we have evading that issue, whether it's Bangladesh versus India, or whether it's China versus India, or Pakistan versus India. All the neighbors, and there are good examples. For example, Mekong Basin, barring China, all the other people have joined hands, and they are looking at the basin as a whole, and then looking at the equity. Similar examples are even in the Nile. Nile, there was a time when they were not seeing eye to eye, but now they have ultimately come to a stage where they have started sitting across the table and then addressing those issues. But then it comes to the same basic question which I was raising, that when you want to discuss these issues, you have to first resolve the complications of the water interactions, generate the information which you can use for negotiations. And that is where the science has to be used. And coming back to what Suresh said, that I was not recommending that for everything you have to look at the basin as a whole. You have to have an iteration between basin, because the policy has to be made at the basin level, action is at the local level. So you have to have mechanisms where you can iterate from the bottom up as well as top down. And then the convergence has to be there, because whatever you are doing at the local level, if you are not able to upscale that, and when you upscale that, you find that much water is not available. So then all your plans are going haywire. So you have to have an iterative process where you look at your wish list at the local level, look at the upscaling effect of that, and then evaluate that option with respect to the total water availability. So there has to be an equity, because in India, Ganga Basin means 11 states. So you have to bring them on board. You have to make them understand that this is what is their share. It works out to be that much. Now, within that, you have to manage. And when you come down to the fact that the action is at the local level, it is more on the administrative level, it's at the district level. Every plan gets converged there at the district level, is the district magistrate, which is spending that money. So he has to really look at the convergence, that all those programs where he's getting the money, are they fitting well into the overall plan of the water basin, of the river basin? If not, then what actions have to be taken? So I think there's an issue of convergence, and now the technologies are ripe to make all that possible. You can have the databases which can give you all the information. You can have all the analysis. You can have all the scenarios generated, which can be the starting point for negotiations. And that can be done at any level. You can even do that at the district level. Look at what is the equity of the district in the river basin, and then let the district confine to that. They have to manage within that. And then if you do that, then you'll find that the solution will be really sustainable. Okay.
Right. Thank you. So, yeah, right. And then from yourself, but afterwards, yeah.
Same. This is basically what he was hinting at, the Brahmaputra river basin, right? Now, Brahmaputra or Mekong river, which you have, actually China controls 60 to 70% of water in all the South Asian region. Tibet is water tower of Asia. And upper riparian control is with China. During Doklam, they didn't share any upper riparian data with the Brahmaputra river. And there are news that they have also polluted this water post Doklam. And this had again happened around 3 months back. So in such a scenario, when we are dependent on Brahmaputra water, and China controls that through dams and other methods, and they're not sharing data, how do we manage this kind of, the entire northeastern India and parts of those subsequently country, they are always a threat to this water. So irrespective of and we know that China is a rogue country.
You're right. And
Just very briefly. Yeah, please go ahead, but briefly, yeah.
Okay, yeah. We have been supplying this simulation data because every time, every day when we get the data from IMD, we are using it for the Brahmaputra also. And we are feeding that back to I didn't want to declare here, but we are feeding it back to the government. And we are simulating that, knowing the rainfall, which is indirect assessment from various sources, you can find out how much is the flow coming into your system. And if it is coming less, how much has been diverted. So knowing that how much is now the flow available from your own land mass, you can then manage. You can keep on fighting with China and that, that whatever. But as of now, you can know that what will be the changed scenario, and that you can plan on. That's possible. That we have been already supplying that information to the government.
Right. Thank you. So one question, please, for the gentleman, and very brief question and very brief. Then we will ask one of the other panelists to please give the response. Thank you.
Professor Gosain, my question is regarding the development in mountain, particularly water management in mountain area like Uttarakhand. Recently, we had a Joshimath. So can we delay our development in mountain area? How to this go, water management, so that there is no loss of human and property?
There are two aspects of water management in the hilly areas. One is that you have to make your people safe against the disasters. And for that, you need to do the floodplain zoning, because most of the action, most of the miseries have happened because of the fact people have encroached the floodplain, which belong to the river, and nobody knows that they are encroaching, and that is the lack of information. So is important, is the right time, though the Central Water Commission has been doing for quite, and they started this query with the states that they should do the floodplain zoning. Floodplain zoning means that you can then demarcate the area which is the area of the river which will be inundated if it is 1 in 50-year flood, which is the area which will be inundated if it's 1 in 20-year flood, so that you can then identify that which is the land use which is possible, which can be permitted in that area. There are some activities which can be permitted and some activities cannot be permitted. So in the absence of that, people are using those areas which are not supposed to be used. That is one thing which I think which has to be done to reduce the misery. The other part is that springs and all those things. So I think I wouldn't like to get into that. It's possible to really identify what are the sources of those springs. And you should try to ensure that the changes are not happening there so that the springs are still functioning and they are not drying up, which is happening in most of the hilly areas.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the questions. Now I'll ask the panelists, just each of them, to give one keyword about what is the main key point we want to take away from this session. So Dr. Jyoti, from your side, one keyword.
I think I would put optimal use as a proposal to each water user for betterment of their own self and others. So optimal use of water.
Yeah, thank you very much. From Mr. Bapu, what would your keyword be?
I'm very bad at this. I can't give one word, but I'm just taking the liberty. I think rivers and wetlands will hold the key for our adaptation strategy and therefore resilience.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And for our online speaker, what would your keyword be for your main keyword for today?
I think it would be interlinkages. Interlinkages, be it across freshwater ecosystems, across river, lake, wetland, groundwater, or interlinkages between different departments or sectors that need to come together to work on this wicked problem. So I think interlinkages would be my keyword.
Thank you so much. And to Professor Gosain, what would your keyword be?
My keyword will be convergence and integration of sectors.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think by this, we'd like to thank our panelists for being here today. Of course, thanking all of you to be here today. Would you like to say something also here before we close? Huh? Any from your side would like to speak? Yes, please. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. It has been a great pleasure. Please come.
I think I just wanted to thank all of you for these important deliberations which we have been able to facilitate, and particularly our expert panel members who have really told us what is to be done in the future, and particularly in the water, UN water, the cooperation agency, which is to take place in March. I think this discussion will be very helpful over there. So thank you very much. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for conducting this session in a beautiful manner and conducting all our expert members for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have our online speaker. Huh? No? No.
Well, with this, we conclude our thematic track, and thank you all on behalf of TERI and WSDS, respected panelists and audience, for joining us for this session. It has been a pleasure and privilege to host this session. Thank you.